This episode of Crowd Scene was recorded back when the show was called Kickstars. So every time you hear the words Kickstars, think Crowd Scene. You can now find us at crowdsceneshow.com and also follow us on Twitter at crowdsceneshow. Thanks for listening.
Kickstars.
In this episode, we meet Kelly Angood, the entrepreneur and creative force behind the Pop-Up Pinhole Company. She ran a very successful crowdfunding campaign which got a lot of attention, and for her, it all starts with a little DIY.
I've never had a background in product design. I've never had a background in engineering, anything like that. I've really just been a really big fan of sitting down, having an idea, and just trying to figure it out.
Kickstars, gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Kickstars, interviews behind the hype. Kickstars.
Hi there.
Hello.
Welcome to Kickstars, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. I'm Michael Ogden.
And I'm Peter Dean.
In each episode of Kickstars, we speak with people who have taken a risk by turning an idea of theirs into reality by raising money on a crowdfunding platform. But what did it take to reach their goal? I like to hear the story behind the idea, understand where their concept came from, and learn what it meant to find success.
And I'm interested in how you design and run a successful campaign, as well as what our guests have learned along the way. We'll talk about some of the factors that can make or break a campaign.
So in this episode, we're talking with an incredibly talented London-based designer, Kelly Angood. We'll be hearing about her successful Kickstarter project from 2013, the Pop-Up Pinhole Project, to create a unique, affordable camera. It's a pinhole camera made of cardboard that you assemble yourself. She took the legendary Hasselblad camera, something exclusive and unattainable for many, and reimagined it in everyday accessible materials.
So in order to fund this project, Kelly set her sights on a goal of £15,000. But by the end of the campaign, 881 pinhole camera enthusiast backers had helped her more than double that and took the total over £35,000. That's around $54,000. Among the many amazing things that were said about the project, Fast Company called it a celebration of vintage cameras, papercraft, and medium format film photography in one. It's not designed to make photography simple, it's designed to make photography fun.
So as always on Kickstars, we'll hear Kelly's story, and then she'll be sharing her top tips for crowdfunding success. Let's welcome to the show, Kelly Angood. Hey, thank you for joining us.
No problem.
And a big congratulations on your successful campaign.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's set the scenes. For our listeners who aren't familiar with your project, how would you describe it to someone who hasn't heard of it before?
I designed do-it-yourself flat pack pinhole camera kits that can act as either an introduction to pinhole photography or as a addition to someone's pinhole camera collection. All designed in the UK, made in the UK, screen printed. They're, beautiful design objects as well as functioning cameras. They
are beautifully designed. I mean, they're gorgeous, and they're kind of works of art just as a flat pack.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I actually know a lot of people who have never even put the kits together and just like them as the sheets. They've kind of just had them like that. And I'm like, well, that's not the point, but you're more than happy to do that. That's a nice thing to hear in a way.
Yeah, well, it's almost they should be buying two of them. One to just put on the wall and one to make a camera from. So what was the moment that the pop-up pinhole idea was born?
Where it actually started for me was at university. I was at university in Brighton on the illustration degree, but I was always a bit of a rubbish drawer, but luckily it was a very open creative course and I was always much more of a maker. And it was during the third year that we had basically free reign to do what we wanted, and I'd always been really into photography and I'd always wanted a Hasselblad, but as a student it was completely unaffordable, so I set myself this brief to make one myself. I didn't know how I was going to do it at the time, but the brief was just had to look as you'd expect it to look in some sense and work as you'd expect it to work, so as a functioning camera. And the easiest way I could think to get it to work as a functioning camera was to turn it into a pinhole camera, which is something I'd only actually ever done a couple of times before, making a pinhole camera, maybe when I was at school or, early art school days. So I, in the end, designed my first pinhole camera, which is in the vein of, what the Vidare and the Vidi are now, which is screen printed cardboard with a medium format mechanism inside, functioning as a pinhole camera. And I had that and a few other pieces of work in a similar vein as part of my degree show. And after my degree show, it was the camera that people seemed really interested in. So it ended up on a lot of blogs, on a lot of websites, which was, really great promotion when you've just finished university. But a weird thing happened was that people started to email me and they were like, oh, where can I buy this from? And I was like, oh, it's just it's a personal project. I don't know. I mean, it's not for sale. Or people were asking, oh, can I make it myself? Because I was, during my design process, I was always uploading photos on, my blog, my Tumblr, of different processes, taking pictures of the screen printing. So people were aware of how I'd made it.
But the plan wasn't to take it out to the world. It was something that was for your degree.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, this is 2010. My main concern at that point was really trying to find a job.
Right.
This isn't a job. This is a, this is a school project, whatever.
Well, any career counselor would say, look, to get a career first you got to make a pinhole camera that will set the world alight.
Exactly.
But can I ask him? I mean, as a kid, were you someone who was kind of endlessly inventing things?
Yeah, I think actually, retrospectively, I definitely was. But at the time, I just thought I was probably normal. But I was always making stuff. Always. One thing that always sticks out in my mind was that I always wanted a 4-poster bed. So I saved up all of, over weeks and weeks. I can't believe my mum let me do it. She let me save up all of the middles of toilet rolls and the middles of kitchen rolls. And I basically made myself a 4-poster bed on my bed.
Out of cardboard?
Yeah,
Yes, amazing.
And I was like, well, maybe that was an indication as to, why I'm doing this now. But
years later, you're still sleeping on that 4-poster cardboard bed, right?
Right, and it's beautiful. No, do you know what? I don't think it lasted very long. It was quite structurally unsound.
Well, it sounds like actually you had a very supportive family who wanted to see you, who liked seeing you inventing things.
Yeah, I think really they just liked anything that kept me quiet, was the truth. And I think if they could put me in the corner with some sticky tape and some paper and some cardboard and a pair of scissors, I was more than happy. So yeah, I mean, I was never stopped doing anything. I think maybe that was part of it.
Were there at that, when you first worked up that prototype, were there skills that you did not have that you've had to learn along the way?
I feel like I've never had a background in product design. I've never had a background in engineering, anything like that. I've really just been a really big fan of sitting down, having an idea and just trying to figure it out. I mentioned before that I was not particularly a good illustrator, and I'm not really even a sketcher, to be honest. When I have done any of my projects, I've just sat down with a bunch of cardboard or whatever material I'm using and have just try to figure it out straight away in 3D. So yeah, I basically feel like I've never had any of the skills. I've just tried and it's worked.
I find it really surprising that you say that, because if looking at that first pinhole camera you made, the artistry on the outside of the case is phenomenal. It's such a beautifully accurate rendition of a vintage Hasselblad. It surprises me that you say you're not creative in that way, because from an outside point of view, it looks like you're really creative in that way, and you absolutely nailed it.
I think I'm very neat. I think I've basically got OCD.
That helps, yeah. So, Kelly, after that initial interest, what did you do next?
After I'd gone around the blogs a little bit and people were contacting me quite a lot, it was around that sort of time that I moved back home with my parents, and at the time I was living in Brighton, and my parents I grew up in a town called Boston, which is in Lincolnshire.
Okay.
So it was, a really big change. I'd moved from this creative city, and then I was back in this kind of small town, which, there's no jobs there that I wanted to do anyway at the time. So I was kind of plonked myself in my dad's garage, which I was really loftily calling my studio, which he did not enjoy at all, and, which maybe you can relate to. I have no idea. But, I really wanted to keep up the momentum of being at art schools, and I kind of was really enjoying the pinhole photography aspect of what I was doing while I was there. So I designed basically a downloadable version of that camera. So I designed it into a A4 PDF that you could download for free. I made a little video of how to put it together, a few written instructions, and I just basically got in contact with all of those people that had blogged about the main camera that I'd made when I was at uni, and put it out on my Tumblr that a bunch of people were following. And over the course of about 12 months, it had just over 30,000 downloads, which was kind of insane.
Yeah.
And it had over 70,000 plays on the video. And I was like, God, this is weird.
Wow.
Like, and obviously retrospectively, I wish that I'd just asked for £1, maybe £2. Right. But the reality is the community that built around that camera, is really what has helped me be able to kickstart and build a community around the pinhole stuff that I do now. So that was really the baseline of everything that I did. But
was there something that was a catalyst to that, to grow that fast? Was there a particular moment?
I think the fact that it was just a free resource and lots of people were using it as school projects, university projects. People were sharing the photos. And I mean, it was just, this is over the course of a year. This isn't like, maybe a year and a half. This isn't just like 1 month. To me, that's really big numbers. I know for me, that was pretty incredible over time. But
well, particularly as you were setting this up for a degree show and that, probably your hopes were to get a good grade and then to be thinking about your work. I mean, this was something, it sounds like the success came left field.
It was unexpected. I was just doing something I loved, really. And I was just thinking, how can I get it out there? What can I do? This is way before Kickstarter was a thing in my eyes. And all of this really went on the back burner for me when I moved back to London. And I moved to London, ended up, working in a coffee shop. I was a set designer for a while, which I thought would be great. But actually, after doing all the work with the cameras, I found kind of slightly depressing. So you'd make all these really great, fun things and they'd just be put in a skip at the end of the shoot. And I was like, wow, I'm not used to working in this really disposable way. I was like, it's a bit sad. And then after that, I ended up working in advertising as a strategist for a couple of years. So, I mean, there is a big gap between doing that first initial pinhole work and then launching the Kickstarters. So, but it was always on the back burner for me. It was something that I just sort of did for fun. But it wasn't until Kickstarter launched in the UK that I thought, hey, maybe there's actually a way of getting this idea out into the public. There's no way without Kickstarter this would have ever happened. I don't know what my life would have been. Probably still working advertising. Who knows?
For our listeners, the Hasselblad, we've been saying that a few times. Can you tell us what the Hasselblad is?
So for people that don't know, a Hasselblad is a kind of really high quality, pretty pricey, medium format camera, essentially.
Yeah.
As well, I guess a definition of what a pinhole camera is in terms of what kind of photographs you're kind of taking, because you're not taking action photos with a pinhole camera. What kind of things are you taking?
Well, they are actual photos.
I mean, sorry, action photos.
Oh, sorry.
They are actual photos.
Yeah. Screw you, Mike.
How dare you? You know nothing about cameras.
Okay, so a pinhole camera is a camera without a lens. You sometimes might hear it be called lensless photography. So instead of a lens, it instead has a tiny, tiny hole, usually less than a millimeter in diameter. The pinholes on my cameras in particular are 0.2 millimeters. And as light goes through that hole, it exposes the film. So as the hole is so small, you need quite a while to actually allow the light to pass through and make an image. So the exposure times are much longer than you'd normally expect. Normally, with a camera, you just snap it, it'd be a fraction of a second. With a pinhole camera, you might be anywhere between a couple of seconds to, some people can even do it for a few days, depending on what kind of film you're using. So which means that you can do some really creative things with it. It's a really interesting process. It's quite a slow process, but I think these days it's actually a really good thing to slow down a little bit and think about what you're doing. Also, with pinhole photography, you rarely have a viewfinder, so it's quite experimental in that sense as well.
So there's some surprise in what you might get.
For sure, yeah. When anyone takes their first pinhole photograph, they're so amazed that it even works, especially with the camera that they've made themselves.
When your friends first saw the prototype, what did they say? What were some of the comments?
People were like, that's cool. Like, cool. I don't know.
Well,
they were really impressed, weren't they? Some friends they were.
To be honest,
They sound pretty chatty.
I don't know, but I think friends-wise, because a lot of people have been very used to seeing me make things all the time, they were like, yeah, whatever. I think actually they were more impressed when they saw that other people were impressed.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
like when it went on blogs and stuff, they were like, God, yeah, actually, maybe that is cool. I don't know, like, you know, it's a bit of validation, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes sense. So part of the pleasure you mentioned of the experience has got to be making the camera yourself. Was that always the plan to send it out as a flat pack?
To be honest, when I actually designed the pinhole Hasselblad at university, I laid it out not like a flat pack, but I really loved layout drawings. It was one of my things that was just a really big inspiration for me, you know, like Haynes manual style, like loved all those.
Yeah.
Like engineering diagrams. I didn't know how to do them or anything. I was just like, oh, these look great. So as part of that work, I had it, you know, laid out, and it was just something that I liked. But really, it was the easiest way to get my idea shared with the rest of the world, you know. I was like, right, so what's a way other people are going to be able to make this? It's going to have to be flat pack. I can't send them out ready-made. That's too much work, and all the fun is in making it. So that's really the reason why it's a flat pack.
So let's talk about crowdfunding, Kelly. Why did you decide to crowdfund this?
Honestly, it was during the time when Kickstarter had just launched in the UK. I was aware of Kickstarter in the US.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just you'd often see a project or see a fun thing on there, but it just was not an option to do in the UK. And as it launched in the UK, suddenly something clicked with me, and I thought, wow, this is a fantastic opportunity to be able to try and fund this idea that I've got. So really it was just timing that it came up as an option. And it was definitely the early days of crowdfunding in the UK when I launched the Pop-Up Pinhole Project. It was, serendipitous timing, I'd say. That's my real answer to that.
What would have happened if you hadn't crowdfunded this, or if that timing wasn't there at that time? Would this project have died?
Yeah, I don't think it would have even have started. I think it would have remained on the back burner. I would have just continued on in my career in advertising. There's no way I would have been able to fund it. And I don't think that actually there would have been a way of, I mean, it's not like I had a business plan around it. Now it's a project that, you know, just a really passionate project for me that's turned into a business. And now I'm almost writing the business plan now rather than, you know, it's something most people do at the very beginning. So I don't think I'd have even thought about getting funding for it. I don't think, another great thing about Kickstarter is that it really validated interest in it, because I didn't even know that there was that much interest in it. It was a real shock to me, actually. It really was.
So once you decided to do this, what steps did you take to organize and launch your campaign?
I guess my experience of working in advertising had really helped out, because I'd seen a lot of brand videos, read a lot of brand manifestos, which are really, you know, the distillation of a brand story. Mm-hmm. So having that in my mind really helped me to sort of craft a video that I thought was going to help people on board to my project, which is what I would definitely recommend for other people to do. You know, go and read a bunch of brand manifestos. I mean, it's all doing the same job at the end of the day. You know, they're trying to sell you their product. So you're trying to effectively sell your project to someone. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an interesting little bit of research to do. And obviously, I did plenty of research on Kickstarter as well. I didn't want a video that was super long. I didn't want it to be I didn't want to be in it personally, so I did a voiceover for that one.
Why didn't you want to be in it yourself?
I'm less so these days, but at the time I was extremely shy.
Oh, really? Camera shy?
Yeah, very camera shy.
Unusual for a camera maker.
Well, I just like to be behind the camera. I just wasn't very confident with it. I don't know. It was also with Kickstarter being a new thing in the UK. I think in the US it has a different feel almost. In the UK, since I've done the projects and I've become a bit more in the spotlight through doing it.
Yeah.
People, even in the UK, some people have asked me things like, but don't you think it's a bit like begging? Like, do you actually need the money?
That's a very British approach, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I say to people. I'm like, that is an extremely British thing to say. And when the person asked me that, I was on a panel in London, and luckily, Stephanie, who works at Kickstarter. Stephanie Pereira.
Yes.
She actually was on the panel with me, and she luckily just like swept up the question and like spat it back out and projected it in a really fantastic way, and kind of was saying almost, how dare you suggest that it's begging, that someone's been working on this thing for free for 2 years and whatever. So
that's always a good response, kind of the how dare you response.
Yes.
Yeah. It kind of puts people in there.
She did it in a very, very friendly way, but it really put him in his place. And I was like, yeah, you're good. I like you.
So your campaign goal, Kelly, was £15,000. How did you get to that figure? Where did that come from?
Honestly, it was just a bunch of research. I'd never manufactured more than one of anything in my life. I'd made the prototype. I'd done it with processes that I knew, and I guess I was fortunate because the processes that I'd used to make the prototype were going to be the processes that were going to be made to use the final thing. Whereas obviously if you're doing something a bit more techie, or you're doing molding, that's not necessarily as easy.
Yeah.
But it meant that I could get in touch with a load of screen printing people, get in touch with some die cut people, and just really try and figure out my cost from there, which is exactly what I did. The cardboard manufacturers that I made my very first pinhole Hasselblad with, and that I basically use the same supplier now. I've not changed anything, so I love it. I'm like, this is the best quality I found. I'll use that. So it was just really scaling it up, figuring out what it would cost me to make each of what thing. And because of the way I manufacture, I don't really have any economy of scale, which is kind of bizarre for manufacturing. But because they're screen printers and you pay per pull, this kind of thing, it allowed me to do that. The one thing that I found that I couldn't necessarily figure out as easily was postage, because when you do a Kickstarter campaign, you obviously don't know who's going to buy it. And I actually didn't realize at the time how global it was going to be. So there's 881 backers and it went to over 41 countries, and there's no way that I could have predicted that. So cost for postage and stuff like that was a little bit more than I'd anticipated, but luckily because of the overfund, it didn't, it really didn't matter so much.
Your project, your DIY version, had been downloaded 60,000 times. Were you collecting email addresses, or how did you kind of build your community before you went live?
Yeah, I was collecting some email addresses, but I mean, bear in mind that at the time I'd just come out of university and I was not that savvy. And I was just interested in sharing it. I wasn't thinking it would necessarily go anywhere after that. I didn't even know really how to collect people's email addresses.
Right.
And so what I was really relying on was kind of the feedback loop. So people downloading the camera and then them coming back, following on my Tumblr, and then them posting photos that they'd taken or projects they'd done with it. So it was really, I think the followers from my Tumblr were my real keystone audience at that point.
Do you know how many people you had following you at that point?
Yeah, probably about 10 or 12,000 at that point.
Oh, okay.
So right before you went live with your campaign, put us in the room. What were your main concerns about the project? What was your biggest fear?
Well, I think my biggest fear was just, God, what if no one wants it? What if I've put all this effort into designing this thing and no one cares? I think that was really the biggest worry for me. I mean, it's not like I was relying on it for money or a job. I was just thinking, God, I really hope that this is something that people want. And then as soon as it funded, my biggest worry was, oh my God, how do I get this many things out and this many things made?
Yeah.
That's a different kind of problem.
Yeah. It's a nice problem to have.
It's a high quality
Exactly.
problem.
Okay, Kelly, we're going to take a short break here. And when we come back, we're going to be hearing about what happened as you launched the campaign.
This episode is sponsored by Syndicate Room, an equity crowdfunding platform in the UK. So, what does that mean? Well, in exchange for your money, you receive equity in a business. Syndicate Room is an investor-led platform. So when you invest in a company on Syndicate Room, you're doing so alongside sophisticated investors. These are highly experienced business angels. They look at these early-stage businesses, they carry out their due diligence, they value the companies, and they invest their own money. Only then does a business meet the criteria necessary and the investment is opened up to the crowd. So the crowd can invest side by side with these experienced investors. And what's the best part? You get the very same deal on the same economic terms. So visit syndicateroom.com to see the current range of opportunities so that you too can invest with the angels. Please remember that investing in early-stage businesses is risky, and Syndicate Room is targeted at sophisticated investors that make their own investment decisions and understand these risks. So check it out at syndicateroom.com.
So there you are, Kelly. You're ready to launch. You're just about to press the button that launches the campaign. Can you describe for us what that moment was like?
Very scary, very scary. In a way, it was a relief because, you're about to present this thing out to the world, but at the same time, it's a really worrying moment at the time that anybody puts a project out to the world. When you do that, you're essentially seeking other people to come and enjoy what you've spent so long doing. So it's daunting. But as soon as that first person backs your project, you're the most grateful for that person of any of your backers. Because you're like, this is like real belief. And especially if it's someone you don't know, that's the best feeling ever. And luckily for me, that came within the first couple of hours, so that was super exciting. Yeah, it's a daunting prospect, less so on your second or further Kickstarter projects, but the first one, it's a real test of your mettle. I think you're really just staring at the computer screen for a long time and feeling refreshing.
Yeah, and feeling kind of vulnerable. At this point, were you thinking that you could turn this into a career?
Absolutely not at this point. No.
When you'd kind of exhausted those avenues, how else did you boost the support?
So really, I was getting in touch with anyone I could, essentially.
What does that mean?
People that had blogged about the first Pinhole Hasselblad, I was getting in touch with them. I was getting in touch with journalists that I thought might be interested, photography blogs, craft and DIY blogs, basically anyone that I thought might be interested. And I was super lucky because actually I did manage to get some really fantastic press during my Kickstarter project. Featured on Fast Company, the Daily Mail, which was a really bizarre one, but cool. Great. Yeah, and I was like, and obviously the comments were interesting online. So.
And were you sending out a press release to get those publications to cover you?
Yeah, exactly. So I put together a small press release, had a few photos that I'd taken of the prototype, and just sent that out and hoped for the best. And yeah, luckily lots of people did pick it up. But I think also it was great because at the time lots of people were talking about getting away from the computers, what's the internet doing to us? It was kind of fitted in this whole digital detox cultural thing that was going on. So at the time, I was very fortunate with that side of things as well. Obviously, there's a lot more of that now, and the market's a bit more saturated of, do-it-yourself products. But I think it was kind of quite fresh at the time. And
Kelly, can you describe for us what was the best day of the campaign?
The first day, during that time when I was getting to be sure that this was going to turn into a reality. But maybe it was a bit of a knife edge because it was fantastic that I thought it was going to happen, but at the same time I was kind of scared. I was like, wow, I'm actually going to have to do this. I'm going to have to manufacture these somehow. And even though I'd done the research, I knew it was possible, and I was happy with my suppliers. Actually, I'd never done it before. I'm going to have to wing it really and try and figure it out and hope for the best. So that was maybe the best and the worst days, but
the best and the scariest day. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But other days were great too, such as when if you get a really good piece of press. And the reason why I feel like that is so great is because it opens up the project to people who then can become really excited about it. So if you get a good piece of press and then there's a comment section and people love it. I mean, some people hate it. That's always going to happen, but it's nice to feel like that has opened up a really great opportunity for you to talk to them and for them to see your project too. So it's exciting when the good press happens too. So like even just a really small, passionate photography blogs about it, that's equally as exciting too, because you know it's coming from a real passion point and they're talking to a real niche audience that maybe be more excited than just your average, you know, day-to-day person.
Yeah, of course.
Did you ever consider building a team, working with a friend or a partner?
To be honest, no. I didn't even really think about it as being an option. I always work pretty autonomously, and I just didn't even think I needed to do it. I was just like, well, I can do this. It's cool. And I was working and kind of thought I could handle it, I guess. And I didn't. And also, there wasn't enough money in it to pay myself for a really long time. So someone else would have to do it for the love of it, and I wasn't sure if anyone else would love it as much as me to do it for free.
I love that, though. I love that. I mean, that is a real confidence of going, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but I will.
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter will do that to you. For sure.
So amongst all the amazing stuff that happened during the campaign, did anything stand out as being particularly crazy?
One thing that really, really surprised me, what I was really surprised about, was the amount of people who just pledged between like £1 and £5 just because they wanted to see this thing happen. And that was a real surprise for me. And in the end, it was around about 50 people that did that. Mm-hmm. And it, in a weird way, that they're some of the people that I'm most grateful for, because that is just like sheer belief.
I noticed that you had one backer at the £1,500 level. Is that right? And they got a photo session with you. Was that someone you knew, or was that a complete surprise?
No, that was a surprise. It was actually someone from Germany, bizarrely, who came over and did that. And it's, a super fun day. And to be honest, I was as surprised as you when to see that. I was like, wow. Because I think when you do have a product, most people just want the product.
I think it's always worth having those I think it's always worth having those higher levels of rewards, because unless you're really silly about it, you just never know. And someone out there might love the project even more than you.
Yeah, you never know. And that was exactly my thoughts on it. You've got to have it. Why not? And yeah, it was fantastic. It was a really exciting day to have her over. We actually ended up not necessarily doing the portrait, but doing a photo walk around London, had a bit of lunch. It was a really lovely day.
When you're on your own and you're kind of trying to move a project forward, I mean, what keeps you motivated?
Well, I mean, the motivation is really the promise you've made to all these people. Once you've gone past your goal, you're like, well, great, I've got the money to do this, and I'm going to have to do it, whatever. But at the end of the day, I felt like I had 881 promises to make to all of these people, and they had to have this thing at the end of it. And that was really my key motivation for doing it. Just like they've shown me their support, I need to show it back and get them their camera on time and do this.
I think that's a good thought. And talking about getting the cameras to people on time, how difficult was it for you to ship, almost 900 flat pack cameras around the world
to 41 different countries?
Yeah, it was difficult, but I knew that if it was going to fund, it was going to be a challenge for me with working as well. So I gave myself plenty of time. In fact, I gave myself like 4 or 5 months to get these things out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but I knew that's what I would need, because I was going into the office 9 to 5 every day, and I'd take the odd holiday day in order to go and visit my suppliers in Leeds or go and visit the warehouse that I ended up working with in Peterborough. So I knew I'd need a bit of time. But luckily I was working with some really great people. I met with a great fulfillment house who work with quite a lot of startups. They're really brilliant. I still work with them to this day, and they just made it really easy.
Can you give us a shout out? Who was that company?
Yeah, so they're called Brace Solutions, and they're based in just outside of Peterborough. Okay. Which is a great place because it's basically in the middle of England, so it's easy for them to get everywhere. And then I came to them and I was like, right, I've done this Kickstarter thing. I know where I'm getting them made. And then they actually helped me find a box maker to help make the actual boxes, who they had a contact with. So that really helped me out. And then there was also a service that they offered where they could sort of put together the packs and then send them out. But at the time, I was like, no, I'm going to do that, which retrospectively, I definitely shouldn't have done. I should have just let them do it because it was really stressful. And I had to get all of my friends involved. And at the time, I had this really small studio in Hackney. I had to move everything out of it, just have a couple of tables, and it was like a sweatshop. And I was basically giving people like bourbon biscuits and tea. Like, I will buy you wine after this. Just we need to keep going. So I was filling all these little tiny bags with all the different components for the cameras,
wow.
which now when I manufacture, I definitely just let the guys at Bray do that because I think I've maybe exhausted the kindness of my friends now.
I bet the first few were fun to fill out, after the first 10 or 20, and that was good times. And then the charm wore off.
When the wine ran out.
Pretty much. It was a bit of a tough one, but so they've really helped me out. And I think one of the things that was great was I went to them and I was saying, oh God, I'm making all of these cameras and haven't got the room to store them, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, and they were like, what, you're making I made 2,000 in the end on that first run. And they were like, oh, you're making 2,000? Oh, that's nothing. We send like 10,000 things out a day. And I was like, oh. So the things that I thought were such a huge, huge problem, they just made seem very, very small, which is fantastic.
That's a good endorsement of Bray Solutions. To pull this project off, I mean, you had to wear several different hats, whether it was a designer, photographer, a founder, business person. Do you have someone who particularly inspires you?
I mean, maybe it's kind of classic, but I'm a big fan of Richard Branson. I really like his style of business. But also my parents definitely are very good. My dad is a car salesman and he's very, very good. He's very kind and he's nothing like a car salesman who you have in your mind, basically.
That sounds like a good sort of car salesman.
Everyone loves him. It's crazy. And
did he have any advice for you when you set out to kind of pitch your project? Did he words of wisdom?
I think one of his key things is honesty. So I think the real advice he gave was just be really honest about what you're selling, just make sure your passion comes through and just go for it. I don't think there's any magic solution in selling things. I think it is actually honesty and coming across as a genuine person. And if you are, then perfect. Yeah. No,
I think there is magic in that. And often that kind of gets, forgotten. And I think probably when you shared your labor of love, that people were not only buying into the product, but they're also buying into you.
Yeah, for sure. And that is totally the case with Kickstarter. And that's, I think, why I felt like I had this personal promise to deliver. I wasn't hiding behind the veil of being a company. It was, I felt completely responsible and completely liable for anything that went wrong, which I still do today, whether I'm, set up with the company or whatever. It's something I'm promising, I'm delivering.
What did that last day of the campaign feel like, and how did you celebrate?
I think I was quite drunk. So, no, it was really, really exciting. I remember getting a load of my friends round and having some, I was going to say champagne, and then I was like, it was definitely Carver. Having some bubbles anyway, and, just going out and having a good time and feeling like, wow, this is real. I guess I was trying to self-medicate my excitement. I was like, wow, I felt like double drunk from excitement and booze.
Double drunk.
Yeah, it was.
What did it mean to you to succeed like that with your first proper crowdfunding campaign?
Oh, wow. It just, it just meant everything to me, really. It was just everything that I'd worked on was completely validated. It was super exciting. It was a new opportunity for me. It was something that I never thought I would ever have the chance to do, really. It was amazing. It really opened up lots of new doors for me. And retrospectively now, I've realised that it sounds kind of big and grandiose, but it has actually changed my life completely. So,
how is it?
At the time, it was worry as much as anything, worry and excitement.
What does being your own boss mean? I mean, is there any part of you that feels you could go back to the life you had before?
Yeah, I think I really like the idea of being my own boss, and I like the idea of making my own decisions. But now I'm getting to a point where I've realised that actually maybe I'm not great at everything, and it would be fantastic if, there's certain things that I'm not fantastic at that other people would be good at, and it would be great if I could get some other people on board, definitely.
So the campaign ended in summer 2013. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done since then and what's going on with you now?
Since then, I delivered Vidare. I sold, or there was back to 881 cameras on Kickstarter. I made 2,000, and in the Christmas of 2013, I completely sold out because I managed to sell them through my own website and through a website called notonthehighstreet.com. So that was really amazing. But that was really good because it gave me a bit of a pool of money to start developing the business and start developing my next camera. With the money that I had left over from that, I put together a new brief for a new camera, which was really formed out of feedback that I'd received from the previous campaign. So people wanted it to be a little bit easier to put together. People were interested in it taking 35mm and medium format film. I kind of realized that there was a really interesting educational element to it. So I wanted to try and work out a way that it could be used in schools. So, and that, using that sort of little brief, I designed Vidi, which is my next camera. And then I put it back on Kickstarter, basically. And that was after I'd done a bunch of testing with previous backers as well. So this time I wanted to make sure it was really, really, really good before I put it out to the world. And then that was on Kickstarter, and it raised just over double its funding goal again, which was absolutely fantastic. And I guess I'd been versed in the way of Kickstarter a little bit more by then, so it was a little bit less stressful. I was a bit more savvy about getting press out. Like previously with the first Kickstarter campaign, I was so busy getting the actual thing put together and the prototype made that really doing the press release and all that kind of thing was a secondary thought, whereas this time I'd had a chance to think about it a bit more. I got my press release out before I launched the project, in a way that most sensible people would do.
How far in advance did you get your press release out before you launched your campaign?
In all honesty, I just did it a couple of weeks before.
Okay.
I didn't, because I feel like if you do it too far in advance, it gets a bit lost. People forget about it. And I managed to embargo a couple of pieces of press for the early days. And I was super lucky again with that one because in the first couple of days, Kickstarter put it in their newsletter, which goes out to, I don't know how many people it goes out to, but it goes out to a lot of people. And it meant that, again, I had a 24-hour slot where it did £11,000, which is amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, which really, I guess, was the foundation of getting to that 39,000.
So I'm interested, Kelly, with this second campaign for the Vidi camera, you'd already built up, presumably, a pretty big mailing list of people that liked what you were doing, and you already had a website where you were selling this online. What made you go back to crowdfunding instead of just putting it on your website and selling it as another product? Why did you go back to Kickstarter?
I really just felt that's where my heartland audience were. I felt like if that's where they found the project one time, this is where they'll find it again. It's a really great way to get your idea out there. The press seemed to be more interested in it. And also, I think Kickstarter is really interesting because it just acts as a one-page pitch for your thing. I think when people come to your website, it's kind of hard for them to come across your website anyway, because lots of people pay a lot of money to get, their website there when you Google something. I don't have any real money to do anything like that. So for me, it was the perfect way for people to discover it without having to spend money that I didn't have on promotion. And bear in mind, at this point, I was still working in advertising and I was seeing hundreds of thousands of pounds being spent for someone to get to notice a new soft drink, which then may or may not even succeed. So I was like, wow, if they can't do it, how am I going to do it, right? For me, it was a real perfect way to get eyes on the project. And also, by this point, I had a pretty good relationship with Kickstarter. And I just I think it's a really fantastic place. It's creativity lives and breathes there, and I wanted to be part of that.
You mentioned about education as being part of your in this next phase. Can you talk about the kids' reaction to your camera when you're touring schools?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do ever. It's the most exciting thing because, at the moment, Video and Vidare, they're in this, as a business, it's an interesting place because they fit pretty firmly within two main categories. So people, a lot of the time, will buy it as a gift for someone that they know likes making things, someone that they know loves photography, someone that they, is maybe into lomography, this kind of thing. And so that's pretty firm. But then the other side is the education side. And I feel like video especially so good because it's real full circle. It teaches you how to make your own camera, how to take your own photos, but also teaches basic principles of physics, maths, design, history, engineering. It's just a real cross-curricular mashup tool that can be used. And when I take it into schools, a lot of these kids have never even used a film camera before. When I do the workshops, I usually take in a couple of different cameras. And I hold up I have a OM10 that I shoot with a lot, and I take it in. I'm like, has anyone ever used a camera like this? And they kind of look at it and they're like, no. And then you hold up a digital camera and like, has anyone used a camera like this? And they're like, yeah. And then you hold up an iPhone and they're like, everyone's hand is up and they're like, yeah, I've used this camera. And then you're like, okay, great. Well, today we're going to make our own camera. And at the beginning, they're a bit like, you can't do that, miss. That's silly. And you're like, no, we're going to do it. It's cool. And then in the end, it often gets to the point where it's lunchtime and they've made the cameras and usually go shooting in the afternoon. And a lot of them are like, oh, I don't want to go to lunch. I want to stay here and do the cameras. And you're like, wow, that's really validating.
That's a win.
Really validating. Yeah, it's fantastic. And some of the best photos that you get back are the photos that the kids have taken.
And what are their reactions once they see their photographs, the kids?
They're genuinely amazed that it worked. Often I go in, I'm like, oh, check out your pics, they're wicked. And they're like, oh, I didn't think that was actually going to work, miss. I'm like, yeah, it works.
All right, we're going to take one last short break, Kelly. We'll be back in a second to hear your advice to our listeners with top tips for crowdfunding success. We'll be back with more Kelly in just a second. We want to let you know we've got some great guests coming up on future episodes, including Matt Hill, a radio producer who rallied his show's fans to crowdfund his podcast about the media. So don't miss it. Be sure and subscribe for that episode and more on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast apps.
So, Kelly, you've run a successful campaign. So what advice do you have for our listeners who would like to start their own campaign?
Sure. Okay. I think something that I touched on at the very beginning, which I think is really super important, is really understanding your story, understanding how you're going to sell this project, this idea to other people. So do absolutely loads of research on Kickstarter, find out what you think's good about other people's projects, find out what you think's bad, watch every single video that is on Kickstarter and has ever been on Kickstarter, even if it takes you a month.
4 years.
3 years.
Yeah. Also, as I mentioned, I think not just looking on Kickstarter, looking at the way brands do this, looking at the way people write their brand manifesto, what's the distillation of your thing and why is that important? How do people put together stories in brand videos? And that, for me, that really helped figure out exactly how I was going to sell this thing. So that was super, super important. Also, with my project, or both of my projects, around about 50% of the people have found the project from within Kickstarter, and the other 50% have found it through external sources. So those external sources are super important. So whether that's press, whether that's people sharing it on Facebook, whatever, all of that stuff is really important. So definitely make sure you've got a really succinct press release together. And what I actually also did, rather than attaching pictures to my press release, I put a folder of high resolution photos and a folder of low resolution photos on Dropbox. So whenever I emailed the press release to someone, I just sent a link so they could download whatever they wanted, which I think worked out better than actually importing them into the press release itself.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you a tip for how I I found journalists' email addresses, which is creepy, but it works.
No judgment
good.
here.
Okay. So, I'd find maybe a journalist that had written something about the importance of not being on your phone all day, or the importance of having a digital detox. Maybe they'd written about a festival where there's no Wi-Fi, anything that I thought there was maybe something interesting and a route in for my idea, which, anyone can do. It takes a bit of work, but it's worth it. So then you've got the name of this journalist that's written about this thing. I'd then find out so say it was like for The Guardian, I'd find out the email format, and there's several websites online where you can find out the email format for big companies. Just like plug in their name into that email format and be like, oh, I read that article you did last month about X, Y, and Z. That was so interesting, and I've actually been working on this project at the time, and I kept it and thought, wow, you might be interested in this thing too. etc. Like really give them a hook into why they're going to be interested in your thing, because I think the killer of getting someone to write about your thing is generalization. Mm-hmm. The worst thing is when you run a Kickstarter, you suddenly realize that lots of people get in touch with you and are like, I can send your press release to 10,000 people for £500. Yeah. And the reality is, who likes to receive a blanket email?
Yeah.
Like, I know people that have had absolutely zero, like I've never done that, but I know people that have had absolutely zero return from it. Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy. Like really, it's a waste of your time, waste of your money. You're much easier to figure out someone who will genuinely be interested in your thing. And
when you write that person, what do you say so that you make sure that email gets opened?
Oh, I actually can't really remember exactly. But I guess I actually really changed my subject line, like email to email, because it really depended what I was saying in the email, why that I thought they'd be interested in it. Mm-hmm. But I just kept it short always, maybe like 5-6 words max. Mm-hmm.
And are you sending out like 5 of those or like 100 of those?
Yeah, probably a couple of hundred. I think the nature of it was that, wow. Yeah, like it wasn't crazy, but also, also use any links that you personally are really great. The reason how I managed to get into the Metro and the Daily Mail that are linked is that I got in touch with I went to the University of Brighton, and they have a really good like alumni service, mm-hmm. and they have a really great business, postgraduate business service. And I emailed them and I was like, I've got this thing up on Kickstarter. This is my story. I was graduating in 2010. Then they sent my press release out to basically their alumni. One of the journalists at the Metro, the Daily Mail, happened to be ex-University of Brighton, which is how I got in there. So absolutely use all of your networks as much as possible. If you've got 1 million friends on Facebook, put it on Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. Just share it where you think it's going to be relevant as much as you can.
And to work up those addresses, though, that certainly does take time. Can I ask you, the moment you decided that I'm going to crowdfund this and the moment you went live, how much time passed? Was it a couple months or how long?
To be honest, I was just doing it throughout the campaign. I wasn't really doing it before at all. Okay. It was just something that I was like, because I was completely unversed in the ways of Kickstarter, mm-hmm. I was like, oh God, I suppose people need to write about it.
But next time you might have that all in advance.
Yeah, exactly. I think, for sure, exactly. It's definitely a great thing to do before you launch, and that's a definite piece of advice I would do. Try and figure out some press. If there's someone that you can get to do a little bit of an exclusive, perfect. If you can agree for them to embargo, release your story the day that your project comes out, and it's a reasonably, big name, maybe a good design blog if you've got a design piece, fantastic. That also can really, really help you out. But initially I was just doing it as and when, which is probably why I had to become so creepy, because I knew that blanket things weren't going to work. I was just like, right, I need someone to find really niche to write about this.
Sounds like you really did your homework with all of that press work. You had never done any of this before, and yet you're sounding now like you really know your stuff.
Those are good tips. Thank you.
I don't know if I do.
I'm just going to recap your 3 top tips for everyone, Kelly. So number 1, you said that people should really understand their story and become an expert on crowdfunding. Number 2, you should ask yourself, what's the distillation of your project? What's the thing that's really important and really unique about it? And number 3, make sure that you really get your act together with press and make it as easy as possible for journalists to pick up on your story. And then you were talking about the importance of making it personal when you contact journalists, not just sending them the same press release that everyone else will get.
Exactly. And something that I would add to that was just try and have fun. Always try and have fun with what you're doing, because it can very easily become pretty stressful. And, you're thinking about business stuff, you're thinking about everything, but at the end of the day, this should be your project, your fun thing that you're doing, and just try and relax a bit as well.
Excellent.
Don't be too stressed.
Now, we Kelly, we've got a question from the mailbag. I think there must be a better title for that, Pete. Mailbag?
I don't know. It's your title.
All right, let's check that mailbag. Direct from our Twitter, which is at Kickstars Show, or via our website, kickstars.net. Today we have some questions from a Chris Day via his Twitter account, at Wordbeard. Chris writes, love the viddy. And that's your camera. So love the viddy. Celebration of old tech and the handmade. Got a couple of questions. And he says, what toys were you into when you were growing up, and which might have influenced the playfulness of the viddy?
What toys were I... Ooh, that's something I've never been asked. Interesting.
Question.
Well done, Chris.
Yeah, interesting question. Honestly, I was a real maker always. Anything that came as a kit, anything, I would just... To be honest, I don't really remember having anything that I really, really loved as a toy. I just used to make stuff. I had a bunch of, like a box of paper. I was always really crafty, I suppose.
So you had a favorite pair of scissors and some construction paper.
Favorite pair of scissors. How about Lego?
Yeah, Lego I had some of. I mean, honestly, I was like a cheap date. I would have like a box and be perfectly happy.
That is a cheap date. And a pair of scissors.
My mum will probably listen to this and be like, well, that was a lie because I spent this. And the thing is, I can't remember any of that. All I can remember is like making stuff.
Hundreds of dollars on all these fantastic Christmas gifts and birthday presents.
I was like crying about having to have, and I just can't even remember.
So
the visual you've conjured up is like just you in a room with a box, a cardboard box and some scissors.
Crying yourself to sleep.
Yeah, no toys.
Yeah. So were you the kid who would play with the box and not the toy?
Yeah, I pretty much think that was me. I mean, obviously I liked all the standard stuff, but the things that really sticks out in my mind is just making stuff always and drawing a lot.
Chris also wrote, he says he wondered what's next, a DIY DV cam, the first flat pack zoetrope, a homemade darkroom kit, for kids. So Chris asked, what's next?
I'm actually in the process of doing another kit and writing a book to go with it. So that's the thing that's actually next. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in the whole like making kits, developing kits, this kind of thing. And I'm also in the process of developing a bunch of like how-to videos and stuff like that to help people find it a little bit easier to do pinhole photography.
And when do you plan on having that book out?
Probably in the next 12 months.
Okay. Yeah.
So Kelly, before we wrap up, it's time for what we call guest picks. And this is where our guests tell us about another crowdfunding campaign, past or present, that they think is cool. So Kelly, what have you got for us here?
So I was thinking about this and I thought this project was still live, but actually it isn't. And now last week I was in New York and I was at Kickstarter and I met with a guy who has a project that's live. Well, it was live, but it's only just finished, and it's called Fave, their ideal all-purpose knife. Okay. And it was very, very cool. And he is called Dave Latore, I believe you say his name, but he has this super interesting company, which is it really has like Kickstarter at the heart of it. And he lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and his company is called 100. Mm-hmm. And he finds people within 100 miles of Boston who have a business but maybe aren't doing as well as they could be doing. So maybe they're like a crafts person, something like this, but they're very small. He then meets with them, they design a new product together, and then he helps them launch it on Kickstarter. And he's had around about 6 consecutive funded Kickstarter projects doing this. So I think that's really interesting and a really good way of putting a bit of light on these like crafts people that otherwise maybe wouldn't be so savvy in the online world. So I think they're a really interesting company to check out.
Can you tell us his name and the name of the company again?
Yeah, so it's Dave Lattori, and the company is 100. And it's 100.co.
Well, look, it's been wonderful talking to you, Kelly. A big thanks to our guest, Kelly Angood. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we're grateful for your tips and your story.
No, thank you for having me.
It's been our pleasure. So, Kelly, just remind us, where can people go online to find out more about you and your pretty perfect pop-up pinhole project?
Okay, so you can find them at the Pop-Up pinhole-camera-enthusiast.com, which I know is a bit of a mouthful, or another easy way to find it is to just Google Vidare pinhole camera, Vidi pinhole camera.
Excellent. And you've got a Facebook page and a Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook page and an Instagram, which is at the Pop-Up Pinhole Co. and the Pop-Up Pinhole Company on Facebook.
Fantastic.
All right.
One last thing. Kelly, is there a quote that sticks in your mind, words to live by, that you can leave us?
There is. And I think, okay, so this is one by Richard Branson, which I feel like when I read it, I was like, yes, I've always done that. I've always been winging it. Yeah, so the quote is, if somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, but you are not sure you can do it, say yes and learn to do it later, which is their quote from Richard Branson.
I like it. So say yes and then learn to do it later. Excellent.
Exactly. Okay. Kelly, thank you for being a wonderful guest here on Kickstars, and we wish you continued success with your amazing crowdfunded cardboard camera and all your other projects as well. And good luck with the book next year too.
Thank you very much.
So you've been listening to Kickstars, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. Our great thanks to today's guest, Kelly Angood, designer and successful crowdfunder, for her time and insights in this episode.
To find out more about the Pop-Up Pinhole Project, go to thepopuppinholecompany.com. And to hear about upcoming guests on this show, please sign up to our newsletter at kickstars.net.
We hope you like the show, and we'd be grateful if you posted a positive review on iTunes. This helps us reach more listeners.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Kickstars on iTunes or any other podcast app.
Our thanks for the show's theme music to the very talented Kim Bookbinder. Please check her out at kimbookbinder.com. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Kickstars, gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Kickstars, interviews behind the hype. Kickstars, Kickstars. What do you do? What do you say to make crowdfunding go your way? Kickstars, Kickstars. Kickstars, Kickstars, Kickstars. Your shake brings all the backers to the yard.
Now that's what I call epic.